All right, guys, we're on to experiment number 8. Now we're going to we're going to continue to work on parallel circuits. Now we're using parallel circuits with light bulbs. So you have an L1 light bulb and an L2 light bulb. What we're going to do today is we're going to focus on using FL2-1. That is the dimmer element, so that we're not blinding ourselves while we're working. So what the worksheet is asking us to do, the very first thing, is to build the circuit and switch this thing on. So as we build a parallel circuit, remember the parallel circuit is the type of circuit where each load device has its own leg from the same power source. So we're going to go ahead and connect L1, and using the same power source, we're going to connect L2. Okay. And then as we move on, we're going to connect L1 to a ground, and then we will connect L2 to a ground, the same ground, because we're dealing with, like I said, a parallel circuit. All right, so in the next step here, the lab sheet is asking us to measure the amps from L1 and L2 individually. So what we need to do is we're going to rotate our meter to measure 10 amps. When we do that, we have to move the red test lead from the voltage and ohms port to the amps port. Now this is the part of measuring where we can make a mistake and actually damage or overload the meter. So we're going to be very careful here to make sure that we are not going to damage the tool. So if you follow my steps one by one, we should prevent that. So remember, when we are measuring amperage, we need to put this meter in series with the circuit. So we're going to start with L1. So what I'll need to do is remove the ground wire from L1, and in the place of the ground wire, I'm going to put the meter. So what that means is I'm going to take my red test lead and put it on the ground side of the bulb, and then I'll take my black test lead and put it on our ground path. That bulb should come on, and then we have a current reading or amperage reading of 0.49 amps. And you see the bulb came on. When I take out the test probe, the amps go to 0, the bulb goes out. When I put it in, when I put the test probe into the ground path, the amperage show 0.49 volts and the bulb comes on. So for L1, our amperage reading, 0.49 amps. So when we are on step 5, the intensity of L1 is 0.49 amps. So now we will move our ground wire from L2 to L1, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure amps from L2. So the amps for L2 are 0.48 amps. So when you are on step 5, your board might show a number that's a little bit different. The intensity for L2 is measuring 0.48 amps. Now the whole idea of Ohm's law is to memorize the formulas. Once you memorize the formulas, diagnosing a vehicle is easy. An example would be if I have high resistance, which could be in the form of a dirty connector or a pinched wire, I would have a bulb that's more dim. If I have a short circuit or a loose connection, I can use Ohm's law to help me identify what kind of problem I'm looking for. Step number 6 for experiment number 8 is saying, what is the rule of resistance in the parallel circuit? Remember what I said in the last experiment, the total resistance of the circuit will be less than the smallest resistor in the circuit. The total resistance in the circuit will be less than the smallest resistor in the circuit. And then question 7, if we take off L2, what will happen to L1 and why? Well, I'm going to take it off, and then I'll leave that question for you to answer. So let's take off L2. We'll remove the wires. What happens to L1? What happens? What can you see? What's happening to the voltage? What's happening to the resistance? And what's happening to the current? You go ahead and answer it. I'll see you guys soon.